Welcome to Living Beyond the Invisible, the podcast where we explore life with invisible and often misunderstood conditions. I'm your host, Heather, and today we're going to finish our discussion about breast cancer. Hey friends, thank you for tuning in this week to hear about my personal journey with breast cancer. We'll discuss how I found the cancer, getting diagnosed, treatment, and what life has been like since. We'll also talk about how breast cancer has affected my other invisible disabilities as well. So without further ado, let's dive right in, shall we? Now, this doesn't have anything really to do with my breast cancer exactly, but it will tie in just a minute, so I did want to mention it anyway. In November of 2022, I had my annual gynecologist visit. Now, I'm not going to go into details, but I was having some female issues. So my doctor scheduled a follow-up and an ultrasound for January of 2023. Now, I do want to mention at this first appointment, everything came back clear. There were no indications of any lumps, tumors, or breast cancer of any kind. Fast forward to early January of 2023, just a few days before that follow-up appointment and ultrasound. I was sitting in my bed early in the morning after Andrew left for work. I had an itch right under my arm next to my right breast. When I went to scratch it, my hand rubbed against my breast and I felt something funny. Upon further inspection, I did find a small lump on the side of my right breast, just a couple of inches away from my armpit. Now, since I already had a follow-up appointment scheduled with my gynecologist, I kind of shrugged it off and figured I would bring it up with her when I saw her. At the appointment, we discussed, the ultrasound results and everything was good on that front, but I did mention the lump that I had found. Now, she did an exam and thought that it could possibly just be fatty tissue, but decided that it was better to be safe than sorry and send me for a mammogram. I'm thankful she did that. Now, since I was only 38 at the time, I had never had a mammogram performed before, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I called to schedule the mammogram, and when they couldn't get me in for about a month, which was Valentine's Day. I almost said no, let's pick a different day, because honestly, who wants to have a mammogram on Valentine's Day? But that little voice in my head told me to accept the appointment, so I did. I spent that month nervous about what the lump could be and if it would end up being cancer. Something in my gut told me it was, but everyone else in my life said it was likely just fatty tissue and not to be worried. Finally, the day arrives. I had asked Andrew to go with me because medical things cause my PTSD to flare up and my anxiety goes haywire. So Andrew and I made our way to the breast center and I had my mammogram. Of course, Andrew had to wait in the waiting room, but just knowing that he was there really did help my anxiety. Now, my gynecologist did tell me that the technician would likely do an ultrasound after the mammogram just to fully rule out any issues. So I wasn't really concerned when she told me we needed to go to a different room for the ultrasound once the mammogram was over. I just thought that was normal. And I wasn't really too nervous while she was doing the ultrasound either. It wasn't until she told me that she would be right back because she needed to go get the doctor that I knew something was wrong. Now, the technician did try to brush it off as completely normal, saying she just couldn't see as clearly as she would like, yada yada. But friends, I've had enough echoes and ultrasounds to know that when they call someone above them in, it's usually not great news. So a few minutes later, the doctor is in there and she's doing the ultrasound. And as she was doing that ultrasound, I was watching her face. Again, I've had many, many tests over the years. I have learned to read their expressions no matter how well they tried to hide it. So she gets done with the ultrasound and gives me a tight, reassuring smile. I knew then something was wrong. Then she says the words that would change my life. I'm so sorry, but this mass looks suspicious to me and I'd like to do a biopsy. I'll need to call your doctor to have her put the order in for it, but we can do it right now if you're okay with that. Y'all, I was in shock. To find out that this was a suspicious mass, it was a shock. I had been told by my doctor and so many other people for weeks now that it's likely just fatty tissue and to not worry. Now, yeah, my gut was telling me it was cancer, and I really should have listened to that, but I don't think I wanted to. I mean, nobody wants to believe they have cancer. So she then told me that it might be a little bit while they waited for the orders to go through from my doctor's office and to hang tight. At that point, I asked to see Andrew because I was a mess and I needed him. Plus, I wanted him to know what was going on because my phone was locked in a locker in the changing room. The technician did go get him and let him come back, to where I was. And I did make it through telling him what she had just said, and then I completely broke down in his arms. I was a complete and total mess. My PTSD was super high and my nerves were shot. I was honestly so scared that I would end up having a severe anxiety attack while they were doing the biopsy. And I'm still emotional thinking about it now. But once they had the orders, Andrew went back out to the waiting room, leaving me alone to have the biopsy done. Of course, he would have stayed if he would have been allowed, but he wasn't allowed. Now, I do want to make a note that it is not typical to have the biopsy the exact same day, like immediately, but God was watching me and they had a cancellation, so she was able to squeeze me in. And that is a God thing. I will just say that right now, that is a God thing. So a couple minutes later, they had me lying on the table and were numbing the area around the tumor. There are a couple of different biopsies that they can do, but mine was a needle biopsy, which is where they take a large needle and inject it into the tumor and then pull out some of the tissue of the tumor in order to test it under a microscope. I won't lie, it doesn't feel good, but it's more the pinch of the numbing meds, and after that, you just feel pressure. I was, however, sore for about a week afterwards. So after my biopsy, they sent me home with orders to take it easy for a few days and told me I would have the results by the end of the week. As you can imagine, for the next few days, I was a complete wreck. I returned to work, which at the time I was a substitute teacher at the elementary school our youngest daughter was attending. She is now in middle school, so no longer at that school. But at the time, she was a fifth grader there. I had worked in that school for a few years in various positions. So at that point, I had gotten to know the entire staff really well. I cannot tell you how amazing they were. They were so supportive, and I mean, that is a complete understatement, honestly. Almost everyone who knew I had had the biopsy a few days before that made sure to check on me throughout the day. That day, I was subbing in a second grade classroom, right after I took my kids to specials. I think it was art, if memory serves me correctly. I happened to check my MyChart account, which is the website or app that my hospital and the majority of my doctors use to share test results, messages, and such. I had new results. The pathology from the biopsy was back, and while I had no idea what any of it meant, I knew what the words positive for and cancer meant. A few hours later, the nurse coordinator at the cancer center did call me to let me know that it was cancer, and while she couldn't tell me what type it was, or she could tell me what type it was, they were waiting on further pathology to come back in order to give us a better idea of everything. So she set up an appointment for the following Tuesday to meet with a surgical oncologist to, fully go over the results and develop a plan on how to move forward. The following Tuesday, Andrew and I met with my surgical oncologist, and immediately I knew I liked her. She was kind, informative, and took the time to answer all of our questions and go over all of our options. She gave us her opinion on which option would be best and then let us make the decision without making us feel like either option was the wrong option. She also told me if I wanted a second opinion, she would help me find someone that could give me that second opinion and would not be upset about it. How many doctors would say that? Truly. So after all of that, she told me that I had 2 types of cancer, invasive ductal carcinoma and ductal carcinoma in situ. It was stage 1B, but she did warn me the stage could change once she got the tumor out, depending on if the cancer had spread to my nodules or not. My lymph nodes. She also let me know that I was HER2 negative, progesterone and estrogen were positive, which in her opinion was a good thing because those are usually easier to treat. Now, the tumor was a grade 3 tumor, and that means that it is a fast-growing tumor. So she wanted to act quickly. My surgical options were lumpectomy or mastectomy, and she explained the statistics in detail and told me that it was ultimately my decision. In the end, I chose to have a lumpectomy done because the percentage of reoccurrence chances were basically the same either way. The lumpectomy was a much easier surgery, and with my heart, I always have to take that into consideration. And the difference was like a 1% difference. So in my opinion, the easiest and best option for my heart was the best option. Honestly, the best option for my heart is always the only option, in my opinion. And I know not everybody will agree with that, but that's just my opinion. She also suggested that since I have 2 biological daughters, that I have a genetic test done to see if the cancer was genetic. She didn't think it would be since I don't have a family history of breast cancer, but it was better to be safe than sorry later. Thankfully, the test did come back negative, so my girls aren't at any higher risk of developing breast cancer than anyone else is, and I thank God for that. On March 2nd, 2023, I underwent surgery to have the lumpectomy done. Before the surgery, they injected me with a dye in the right breast that would light up any lymph nodes that might be infected with cancer. They did end up removing 3 lymph nodes, but thankfully the cancer was confined to the tumor and a little bit of the tissue around it. Unfortunately, during the surgery, they weren't able to get clear margins, so I did have to have a second surgery, and that was on April 6th of 2023, and that was to take out more tissue to try to get clear margins. At the time of the second surgery, I also had breast reconstruction surgery due to the amount of tissue that they had to remove from the cancer, and I did have reconstruction surgery on both breasts to make sure they were even. After the first surgery, since the tumor was a grade 3, we decided to do what is called an oncotype test, which is a test that tests the genetics of the tumor itself. I know, I didn't know tumors could have their own genetics either, but they do. The oncotype score came back at a 28, which meant I had a little higher of a chance of reoccurrence than we originally thought. Our original plan of surgery then radiation was very likely out the window at that point. My surgical oncologist did refer me to a medical oncologist after we got those results back. She actually referred me to him before my second surgery, and we saw him for the very first time on March 28th. At that appointment, he suggested that chemotherapy would be the best option to ensure that the cancer wouldn't return. We, of course, had to wait until my second surgery was over and I had healed from that. He told me that he would meet with me again on May 2nd. At that appointment, we got the ball rolling on my chemo regimen and went over everything. He went over everything with us. During my second surgery, they did put a chemo port in as well, so that was used to administer my chemo. On May 9th, 2023, I began my chemo treatments. I was on 2 different types of chemo, and I am going to completely butcher these names, so I'm warning you now, and I'm sorry about it. But it was Docetaxel and Cyclophosphamide. whatever. I will put them in the show notes, type them out so you can research them if you would like. I had both of them every 3 weeks for a total of 4 infusions. I also had a Neulasta injection after each infusion as well, and that was to help keep my white blood cell count up after chemo. Now, I was okay for the first couple of days after the infusion due to the pre-meds that they gave me, but after those first few days, my side effects were really, really rough. I couldn't keep anything down, nothing tasted good, and the fatigue was horrible. On top of that, Neulasta can make you have bone pain, which starts a couple days after the injection. So yeah, mix that with fibromyalgia, and it was a truly horrible time that I pray to God I never have to go through again. And I also pray that you don't have to either. With all of that going on, I felt pretty crummy and couldn't do a whole lot for about a week or so. Then, by my 3rd week, I was feeling mostly back to normal, well, as normal as possible, at least. I still felt yucky, but I wasn't as sick and I could get up and move more instead of being stuck in bed all the time. But of course, not long after I started feeling better, it was time to do it all over again. Throughout my chemo treatments, we had to be really careful that I didn't get sick because my immune system was just about non-existent. I spent a ton of time quarantining at home with my family, having to keep their distance. That was probably the hardest part, if I'm being completely honest. No, I take that back. The hardest part was actually when I started losing my hair and Andrew ended up shaving it all off for me. I know, you're probably thinking, it's just hair, it'll grow back, and you would be right, but it's just one more thing that cancer was taking away from me. Did I also mention that spring 2023 was also my oldest daughter's final semester of high school and my youngest daughter's final semester of elementary school? No? Well, it was. I started chemo in May, right before all of the major end-of-year things that they both had. When I say that showing up for those things was rough, that is a huge understatement. But I was there for Marissa's prom pictures. I got to see Marissa lead Haley out during the 5th grade and senior walk at their elementary school. I made it to Haley's 5th grade celebration, which is like a little graduation, and I was there to watch Marissa walk across that stage and get her high school diploma. Yes, I'm on verge of tears because those are major things. And these were things that I told everyone from the very beginning that I absolutely refused to miss. I don't judge anyone who would have had to miss these things. Please don't think that. But for me, they were non-negotiable. I was not missing them. I want my girls to know that no matter what, I will always show up for them. Breast cancer took away way too much from me as it was. I wasn't letting it take those things too. So finally, on July 11th, 2023, I had my final chemo treatment and was able to ring the bell to show I was done and to celebrate. Andrew, of course, was right by my side that day, as he always is when I need him. I have to give him a huge shout out because he was at every doctor's appointment, every surgery, every chemo treatment. That man rarely left my side during that time period. After chemo, I saw a radiation oncologist. Yes, another oncologist. That would be my 3rd. He ordered 20 sessions of radiation. That started in mid-August, and I had to go to these sessions every day, Monday through Friday, for 4 weeks. Andrew, unfortunately, could not get off work to take me every single day, but he worked with my mom, and they made a plan to get me there every day. Marissa even took me a couple times as well before she headed off to college. Now, I know someone who's gone through it is going to ask, why couldn't you drive yourself? And the truth is, I was still really, really weak from chemo. Thanks to all of my pre-existing health conditions, I take a lot longer than most to fully recover. So that is why I was still super weak and driving was not a smart thing to do. But I did make it through radiation with only minor burns, which were like sunburns on the area that they did the treatments on. Once radiation was over, my medical oncologist wanted to put me on Arimidex, which is a once-a-day medication that reduces the amount of estrogen that your body makes. He also had me take once-monthly injections of Zoladex, which basically shuts the ovaries down. I started both of these treatments in October. Arimidex didn't cause too many side effects for me, but the Zoladex was horrible, mainly just because of how much it hurt to get the injection. All in all, though, I only had mild menopause symptoms. I do still take the Arimidex, but in May of this year, I had a total hysterectomy, so I no longer need the Zoladex injections. Thank God. Now, before you ask, I did not have the hysterectomy just to get out of the Zoladex injections. It was actually because I was at a higher risk of developing other female-based cancers, such as ovarian and cervical cancer, to name just two, that I wanted to reduce that risk by 100% if possible. So now you know everything that happened to me during my cancer journey, and sadly, it is not even close to finish. I still have to see all of my oncologists a few times a year for checkups to make sure the cancer hasn't returned. And oh yeah, the chemo, radiation, injections, all the cancer-related treatments caused my body so much stress and trauma that I have developed osteopenia, which is the start of osteoporosis. My fibromyalgia is so much worse, and the fatigue is horrible. I had to quit my job and apply for disability because I have honestly no energy to do much of anything. Most days, I'm truly lucky just to be able to get out of bed and get dressed. So as you can see, going through the cancer diagnosis and all of the breast cancer treatments has really changed my life over the last year and a half. It has been a lot of trials, a lot of tribulations, but I have learned so much about myself in the process. That is all I have for you today. I really hope that this episode gave you a little bit of an insight into what it's like for someone who is dealing with a breast cancer diagnosis and going through all of the treatments afterwards. Getting that diagnosis is just half of the battle. Getting through the rest of it and beyond is even harder, in my opinion. I hope you guys have a great week. And if you or someone you know is going through the breast cancer journey, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to, talk to more people, and sometimes having the been there, done that perspective can really help. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Living Beyond the Invisible. I hope you found the insights and stories shared today helpful and inspiring. Remember, living with an invisible disability is a journey, and together we can navigate the challenges and celebrate the triumphs. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps me reach more listeners and build a stronger community. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Living Beyond the Invisible for updates, additional resources, and a sense of community. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep living beyond the invisible.